and I have a very, very special guest here with me, Kane Roberts from LA, which is 9 o'clock in the morning, or is it 8?
It's 8 o'clock in the morning.
I'm
Yeah.
so sorry, Kane. This I shouldn't have done.
Hey, I get up at 4 a.m. I'm not kidding you. I get up every morning. If I go to bed at midnight, 1 o'clock, for some reason, my eyes open and I say to myself, okay, I'm going to go back to sleep. And I just lay there for an hour and I can't. So I just get up.
Seriously, you wake up?
Yeah, it's been going on for a while.
Really? Because I thought, rock stars and all of that, get late, get up late.
Well, even back in the day when I would do, let's say, a 30-hour bus drive with Alice Cooper and the rest of the band, we'd pull into a hotel. The rest of the band would get a candy bar and go to bed. Alice would find a golf course and I would find a gym that was open and I would go work out. That's the way so that's always been how I kind of roll. I stayed away from drugs and all that stuff.
That's amazing. So we'll get to all that in a second. Usually I read a little bit about my my guest, which I will do in a second. But maybe I cannot help but ask you, do you think a world where Ed Sheeran sells so well is a world worth living in?
What sells so well?
Ed Sheeran, is that his name? The guy from you don't even know who he is, huh?
I don't even know who he is.
Yeah. He's a very popular singer.
So now I take it you don't like the music.
All my kids, I could have said Celine Dion just to say no, even though she's a good singer. But Ed Sheeran, I thought you knew who he was. All my kids.
No, music today. My favorite artist right now. Well, it was actually last year was Billie Eilish, because anybody that comes in with a fresh new style, and also they're so comfortable on camera, because music has become not only oral, but it's also a visual medium as well. So I just think when people come in and they have the complete package like that, I think that's what defines a great artist. I think she's one of them. So, but I don't know who you're speaking about. My musical tastes are very broad, so.
Yeah, so let me read a little bit about you. And I don't know why am I in such a huge focus? I'm like huge on the picture I see here. But anyway, so I'll tell you a little bit about Mr. Roberts here and how we came to be in touch with this, which is amazing. Because first of all, maybe I should say that the point in life when I discovered Alice Cooper, let me tell you where it was, by the way. And I'll tell you, I have to tell people who you are. You know what? Let's wait with that. So Roberts was the guitarist who played on Alice Cooper's Constrictor and Raise Your Fist and Yell albums, and the tours around it. If I think most people remember your look back then, that looked like a big Stallone with a heavy metal guitar that shoots flames in the air. He's the man responsible for Alice's metal years in the late 1980s, and we'll talk about that because Alice came from his worst period ever. He co-wrote nearly every track from these albums, which I know by heart, by the way. Just being on stage, he was a part of the show with his huge, crazy rocket shooting guitars. After Raise Your Fist, Roberts released his first solo album, Kane Roberts, which featured Cooper's lyrics on Full Pull. He then guest on Cooper's Trash album, playing guitar on Bed of Nails, which he co-wrote, which is an amazing song. By the way, we should mention, it comes now. 2 years later, he released a second solo album, Saints and Sinners, which contained the Bon Jovi penned Does Anybody Fall in Love Anymore, previously recorded by Cher as well. I remember buying that record in Tower Records. I don't remember when, but when it was.
I remember that place, yeah.
He's also a skilled vocalist, capable of high range, as evident in his solo projects. He continued backing vocals on several albums, including Steve Vai's Sex and Religion. That's a great album, by the way. And I thought the singer, what's his name, was amazing, right? The guy.
Really, a good young kid. We had some fun recording that. Yeah.
Desmond Child's Discipline. For those of you who don't know who Desmond Child is, you better probably go on another call. One of the biggest songwriters, I think, in our times.
In
And
history of rock, without a doubt, without a doubt.
and the song Shocker by the Dudes of Wrath. I remember that one from the film by the same name, Shocker, which was a
Yeah.
Keith wrote songs for that as well, and there were lots of others there. His additional music contribution includes playing with Bob Ezrin, produced Count 3 and Pray album by Berlin, and the 1986 Rod Stewart album, Every Beat of My Heart. He also co-wrote Take It Off with Paul Stanley and Bob Ezrin, which appeared on Kiss's Revenge album. Roberts took a long hitches from music after his second solo album, but returned in 1999 with a band called Phoenix Down, named for a live portion in the video game franchise Final Fantasy. Phoenix Down recorded 2 albums entitled Under a Wild Sky and New Place Now. Fans of both say that much of the record is inspired by the 7th game in the series, one of Robert's favorite games. After several years from the music industry, working in graphic arts, we'll talk about that, and as a video game programmer, Roberts began working on a new album, Touched, in 2006. Lately, you have a new album, a new solo album, The New Normal, on Frontier Records. Maybe we'll see that clip towards the end of this session. So now let me tell you when I met you. Really, so when I was hoping to avoid all the 80s music that was going on all around there. And whenever we went, I remember those days to dances, I couldn't dance because, I just couldn't dance to the other stuff that was going on. So I didn't have any dates. No, anyway, my point was not that. So it's not like in Israel growing then, it's not like growing in LA and enjoying the rock scene. And I remember discovering Alice Cooper from Twisted Sister. I saw the Brick Reel to Your School.
Oh, yeah.
And I had no idea who Alice Cooper was. I was like, okay, this guy's interesting. And then I checked the Nightmare Returns video. And that's when I met Cooper before Trash, exactly in your period. I know all of your solos by heart. I know all the songs. I mean, my favorite song is He's Back. We'll talk about that soon. Mm-hmm. And it's just amazing that we're in touch. And by the way we're in touch, I'll share that with you, is that I was sitting with, I live in Rye, and one of my kids is studying with another neighbor who's a good friend of mine now, Rob, whom I hope is here. And we're talking, we're all, nobody knows what each is doing, and we're talking about stuff and music. And then, Alice Cooper comes, and then I'm showing him, and let me show you now, after years that nobody knows it. This is what I showed him. I showed him this, which you can recognize, my friend, right?
I do recognize that.
You recognize that, right? Because this is from your album. And I showed it to Rob, and he was like, "Get out of here. My uncle is Kane Roberts." And I told him, no, you get out of here. Your uncle is not Kane Roberts. And he said, my uncle. So we had a fight, and it wasn't a pretty fight.
Oh boy, it was a tough fight too, I bet. Yeah.
It was a tough fight. But in the end, I was like, okay, show me. And here we are today. And you helped me also get Chef Gordon that spoke with us a couple of weeks ago. So this is my hi, how are you opening? How are you?
Great, I'm doing good. Thank you so much for having me here. This is really a wonderful experience to talk to your audience, because I think you have a very specific and kind of special group of people that watch your show to get at the information. And by the way, I saw some of the people that you've had on. There's some major business moguls. So I'm not at that level with business, but hopefully I can give some information that's useful.
Of course. It's all about story. The stories behind people. When we speak to the biggest families in the world, Sheraton and others, and you hear how at the Great Depression they decided, let's build a fancy hotel, and people told them, are you out of your mind? And the first thing they've done was not fire the employees there that were sure they're going to get fired. And they said, no, you are the heart of this. It's the stories behind that matter. And
a beautiful story, yeah.
Your stories and everything about that. So I'm very, very excited to have you here. And you got a great sense of humor. People don't know you, wouldn't know that. I mean, and I'm like reminding myself every time when we text, you're texting Kane Roberts, it's crazy. So first of all, I wanted to ask you, how did you start? I mean, I know things about you that you don't know I know. And I know that you grew up in a family that was, normal family, not heavy metal crazy dudes. Your brother, I think, is very, very different. Your father, how did that happen? How did you end up doing this?
Yeah, it's strange because my dad was a corporate attorney. My brother ended up being a doctor. My mother actually worked in the fashion industry. So I came from that sort of an environment. And what happened was, over time, I guess, I would see different types of bands and different types of music that I found, kind of, interesting. And I'd listen to it and enjoy it. And then I saw Jimi Hendrix, I saw Led Zeppelin, I saw all these heavy metal bands. And I just got hooked. And it's so funny because my parents really wanted me to be a tennis player too. So I was at, by the way, I didn't come from the streets. I was at a country club playing tennis, and Jimmy Connors would be there sometimes and all. So it was a really kind of a cool environment to be in, but one that just wasn't so accepting of heavy metal. Let's put it that way. And I discovered girls and rock and roll and everything, and then everything kind of went out the window. I did get into Boston University, which was something that my dad really wanted me to do, and I said, I'm not happy here. I want to go to the New England Conservatory of Music. So my dad didn't like that, so because he was hoping I'd be a tennis pro or I'd be a lawyer like him or something. And he said, if you can get in to the New England Conservatory, I'll pay for it. He said, the other schools, I can get in on tuba today. He said, it's tougher to get into the conservatory. Well, that year, they accepted 2 guitar players, and I was one of them. So my dad was cool. I mean, he stepped up, he ponied up and paid for it and everything. So I ended up, that's where I started really sort of honing my craft, so to speak. So that's sort of the gestation of the beginnings of it,
Amazing.
Well, I can't hear you for some reason.
Can you hear me?
Can you hear me? Can you hear me?
I hear you.
Oh, yeah, you are. Now you're back. Okay, go ahead.
I'm back. You can hear me.
Yep. Yeah, I can hear you.
So the question was, okay, and then what happened? And then you start to listen to rock. I mean, what kind of?
Well, so I started to, I was playing jazz a lot. Actually, my taste really went towards jazz musicians like Sonny Rollins and John Coltrane, Bud Powell, guys like that. A lot of people haven't heard of, because it was so they concentrated on improv. Of course, at the conservatory, classical music was the main push, and they're fantastic musicians. And people don't realize that there's wiggle room inside those compositions, the interpretations that they do. But improvisation, like, just going off and thinking something, feeling it on the moment and playing it, that was the sort of gratification that I really was attracted to. So I started listening to that. And then as time went on, more and more rock and roll entered my life. And I moved from Boston to New York to be kind of a studio musician and see what I can do in that regard. And, times were very tough. I mean, to make money, I would play at, let's say, a club somewhere. And let's say in Manhattan, it was a club, it was a strip club, but Thursday night is rock night, So I would go in and play, and I'd make $11.87 for the night. But I didn't go home. I went to a hotel, and it was this illegal blackjack game, believe it or not. And it was a bunch of guys, and yes, they were Italian. I'm not saying anything, but they would rent a conference room or a hotel room at different hotels every weekend. And I'd go in there, and one of the guys would take me around and show me where all the guns were. And I'd sit down and I dealt blackjack all night. And I would make, $800 maybe. I mean, tips, and I'd make some nights I'd make a little more. And some of the stories that came out of there are really incredible, because there was a whole, people that are playing blackjack at like 3 a.m. in New York. It's kind of a rough crowd. So it was a wild experience. And finally, in that environment, I get a message, and Alice Cooper wants to meet me. So what I had been doing in the meantime was recording demos, sneaking into studios for free, buying somebody a pizza. Can I come in your studio and record and all that stuff? And eventually somebody sent one of my songs to Bob Ezrin, And, he produced The Wall and also, Pink Floyd, just very well-known guy. And they contacted me. And so I went down to meet them. And, the rest is kind of, I don't know if I'm getting ahead of the game here, but the rest is a little bit kind of history. Alice and I became friends immediately. It was very strange. We were laughing and just having a great time. But I'll tell you something, when I walked in the door to the office, it was in Manhattan, and believe it or not, right down the hallway was David Fishoff. He had an office there. That's when he was managing some of the Yankees, I think. He was being an agent in some regard. And Bob Ezrin, I go into an office, and he's there. He's got a big picture window behind him. The skyline of Manhattan is behind him, big desk. And I guarantee, my chair was low. It was like a lounge chair. So I was looking up at him like the Wizard of Oz. He did that on purpose, I guarantee. And he said, Kane, you're 50% of a great writing team. So I could tell I was being kind of molded for the moment. And so I walk into this room with Shep Gordon, Alice Cooper, his entourage and everything, all these people that had actually changed history. They'd innovated. The culture of music from Alice Cooper had woven internationally into people's minds and hearts. So I get to meet him in doing that. And we just became friends. Alice imitated Floyd the Barber from the Andy Griffith Show. I don't know if anybody remembers that. And I was like cracking up and we were laughing. And that day we drove to a studio and started to record demos for the upcoming albums. That's how locked in we were. Now, you were right. Alice had a very rough period. He had been so into drugs and drinking and everything. He was literally close to death when they found him. And if anybody sees that, there's a documentary called Super Duper Alice Cooper. And if you see, at one point in the middle of it, he's at death's door. So I met him right when he came out of rehab. And I didn't know any of this, by the way. I hadn't been following his history. So I think what they were happy to see was somebody that wasn't doing drugs, somebody that was fully committed to music and excited and enthusiastic to be with Alice at this point. And I think that's one of the reasons I got the job.
And how come you weren't into drugs?
What's that?
How come you were not into drugs and all of that? Everybody.
I'm sorry, you're very quiet suddenly. Let me turn up the volume here on mine.
Maybe it's on my end. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you now. Go ahead.
What was? Oh, I see the speaker is not the right one. Okay, I'll try to fix that. How come you were not on drugs like everybody else that were having fun?
Well, I don't want to say I never tried them. I found that a drug like marijuana was okay. In high school, I was doing it. I was smoking it and everything. And it just seemed it became kind of a silly enterprise for me. I didn't think, and I couldn't really get through the conservatory, the study that I had to do. It was very difficult. I walked in there and they had us sight reading Bach fugues the first day. I couldn't read music at all. So, my theory teacher, and this is like a lesson in life. He took me aside. He said, "You're never going to make it at this school. You should save your parents' money." And at the end of the year, when I did we had to do a test, just with him, where we had to sing and do all these things, all this stuff. He said, "I'm totally in shock. You're one of my best students." And it's not because I have any sort of innate kind of genius in me. I just really studied so much because when he told me I wasn't going to make it, I found that very offensive, So I just wanted to make sure that things worked out for me. But I stayed away from him. I don't want to say I never took drugs, but by the time I got with Alice Cooper, I realized that if anybody is high, and anybody in the audience who still maybe dabbles a little bit and smokes marijuana or does some edibles or whatever, it's fine. But you have to be aware that there's somebody that wants the same thing that you do that isn't high, and they're rocketing past you in life. So I just wanted to feel, because, one of the things I learned was I thought I was the best guitar player in the world. When they flew me out to California, out to Hollywood, so many great guitar players. So I kept hitting moments like that where I had to just shut everything else out and just practice and study. And, as it turns out, it paid off to a certain extent. So I just think, I don't want to say I never did drugs. I did like maybe a healthy array of them, but it was always very, very quick and very temporary. I didn't stay locked in to any extent. Some of my friends did.
So before we go back to your career and what happened there, so your story, by the way, I heard it in different places. My father, as I may have told you, was one of the most famous guitar players and arrangers.
Yeah. Yeah. No, you played me something of his. It was really nice, to be honest with you. Yeah.
Thank you. And when he went to study, the teacher told him, you know what, why don't you, there were two kids, and she told the other kid, you're good, the teacher. And the first, and then she told him, you know what, why don't you be a carpenter? You can be a carpenter. That's a good thing. Because music is not your thing. And then in Miami this year, we have a conference. I've got Yigal Ozeri, who's a very famous painter from Israel. And he told me the same thing. When I was in school, my teacher told me, listen, this child it just doesn't have it. Today is one of the most famous. So you hear a lot of that, when people tell you that, that you're, it's not going to happen. And then you actually end up where you are, being one of the best in what you do. It's interesting.
Well, if you decide your path, I think those people are important. The people that say that to people that in their hearts, they know what they want to do. And they say, okay, I'm going to play music. And when somebody says, no, you're not good enough. Well, to me, that's a challenge. And in terms of how we get to where we are, our station in life, I think many people, the level that they get to, the level of success and where it plateaus, I think all those moments are actually defined at a very young age. Our ability to dream and think without any agenda, any hyperbole, any of the stuff that's going on around us. At a young age, our thoughts are very pure. I think as we get older, we have so many sentences in our heads, and it's tougher to break through any sort of the patterns that we've developed that have hardened or become welded into our life. I'm not a Deepak Chopra evangelist or anything. I'm not that into him, but he did say the sound between our thoughts is the voice of God. And what he meant was, you need to stop thinking so much and just listen for the truth. And I think as kids, when we dream and we think of these things, whether they're exactly what we're going to end up doing, our level of success and some aspects of our journey are delineated at a young age. So I think, as time went on, I knew what I was going to do. There was no question. No one could talk me out of it. My dad, oh my God, corporate attorney. You don't want to be a musician. It's the last thing you want to do. My greatest moment was to send a limo for him to come to the Boston Garden and, see me play in front of 20,000 people. I thought that was, it was a good moment for him as well. So.
And another question I wanted to ask here. So I'm jumping the gun because we'll get back to that in a second, but
sure.
In a way, what I liked about, I don't want to say our music, but I grew on glam rock and all of that, and Van Halen
Sure.
and all of that. If before it turned to grunge, right? If you remember, this music was all about believing in yourself. I don't want to sound cliche, but it was all about either you're AC/DC and Van Halen and you sing about boobs and parties and beer, which is a good
Sure.
thing. It's a good thing because that's the fun. You need to have good humor and enjoy your life.
Right.
Or believing in yourself. If you listen to Paul Stanley and Cooper, and it's all about believing in who you are. Get there, you can do it. The hell with everybody else. You can make it positive. And grunge came with all of the world sucks. World is a piece of how bad, how great music. But it wasn't. When you cannot jog to that. You're jogging. You're like, oh my God, life sucks. You're right.
I gotta stop running. Yeah.
So in a way, it all comes together, and all the stories of the people I interviewed, the biggest families in the world, a lot of the things that kept them to become and kept them going and becoming a huge brand, right, is believing in yourself, which is not a cliche. It's like to always look at the positive side of things, which is what
Right.
that music was talking about.
Right.
Well,
it's funny. I think once a band plays and let's say it hits the public jet stream, well, right at that moment, there's a shelf life. Culture is going to change. Technology is going to come in. Something's going to come in to sort of change the sort of panorama of like all the dynamics that determine whether somebody's successful or still, vital or they're still important to the audience. When I first heard Nirvana, I thought it was amazing. Now I understand what you're saying about the messaging, but culturally it resonated with kids. And I think there was so much in the other form of music, let's call it the 80s music, of spandex and headbands and talking about really pretty girls and how much they hate them because they don't like them. It's like, you're beautiful, but you're evil. And I used to think, maybe it's you, maybe you're the knucklehead, So, but the point is that I think one of the things people have to face is that, because I have a lot of friends that still play that style of music from the 80s and early 90s and everything. They're pretty bitter about it. But I mean, look what happened in disco. Look what happened to, the 50s music. It's just the way things roll. And sometimes, as we get older, we don't get it. And that's the way it's supposed to be. My dad didn't understand what I was doing, and now, if I had kids, I'd be doing the same thing that he was doing. So, I'm not saying that we've all become anachronisms. And that, that sort of references what I was speaking before. If you want to break through any pattern, you need to sort of rewrite some of the stuff that's hard coded into your head. And that takes some real self-inspection that's like not agenda driven. So
I have this theory, which I shared with you, which nobody talks about. Beyond the cultural change, there was something interesting that was happening and was helping that change to grunge. All the glam rock bands, like as if they decided on that together, made their crappiest albums ever during that period, right? So bands like Def Leppard that before had a classic album that's like amazing.
It's outstanding.
Was horrible. And
yeah.
So all these bands that we talk about, Motley Crue and Slaughter and everybody, the albums at that period were horrific. Did you hear it?
Yeah.
Motley Crue did something that was like, what the hell is that? So I think that kind of helped,
Yeah, I think, that's, what is it called? The sophomore curse. People come in and they have an album that, let's say, they've been working on for 20 years internally, even some sort of, they didn't even know they were working on it, but they were developing their personality. So their first effort is kind of a raw explanation of their view of life, and they hit it really hard, musically, lyrically, the whole deal. I think that second album, what happens is usually the record companies in their ear, see, this is what you got to do. You got to have a single. We need this type of a single from you. We need this or that. And they start looking at their fame and they start thinking about what other people are going to think of their record. Now, while you release a record, that's fine. But while you're creating it, if you have some people over your shoulder in your mind, I hope this person likes it. I hope this person likes it. It becomes kind of an untruthful event. I think that's what happens to a lot of artists.
And I think, I want to ask you this, people from Israel would know what I'm talking about. Others wouldn't. Two very famous people. One was called Dudu Topaz, was very successful and suddenly wasn't anymore. And he did some stupid things, ended up in jail, suicide. The other is Hanan Goldblatt, which was a very famous actor who was always, with the girls, and suddenly he thought he was still cool, but it probably wasn't. And he was charged for sexual harassment, ended up in jail, and there are so many stories. And I asked my father about it back then, and he said, fame messes you up and people cannot let go, and that screws them up. And when I spoke to Shep Gordon, he said that the reason he left for Hawaii, right? Was it Hawaii?
Mm-hmm.
He left everything. Suddenly he came, took everything. He said, I went because I knew I would die if I stay here. I will be dead in a year or two. So it's either I'm taking myself the hell out of here or I'm a goner. And then he said that fame messes you up, period. It doesn't matter if you're Adele or if you're, any kind of, it doesn't matter really. It's not rock, it's fame. How do you see that? Why do you think people cannot take both and be normal?
Well, yeah, he said that to me as well. He said fame is not healthy for anybody, and it's only because if you walk into a restaurant now, and of course if you're wearing a mask, no, but if you walk into a restaurant now and sit down. They'll take your order. If I walk into a restaurant with chef, the owner of the restaurant comes running up and he said, "Oh, it's good to see you, Mr. Gordon. What would you like?" And he'll say, "Send the chef out here." And the chef comes out and he said, "What would you like? Just bring me your best stuff." Okay. The point is that as you navigate through life, as it gets out of your way, if it begins to serve you, if it begins to you begin to think that this is normal life. I would spend almost a year on tour and I'd come back and I'd go to a restaurant and I would go, my behavior has to be completely different. I was this loud, 230-pound rock guy, and I'd walk in with my friends and everything. And you have to be more civil in real life because, I would come back to LA and, I have some notoriety, but people didn't recognize me. They didn't say, "What would you like, Mr. Roberts?" It wasn't like that. I think if life becomes accommodating that way, if people come up to you and they exalt you and they love you and they just want your autograph and all that stuff, you start maybe thinking that this has something more to do with you than just sort of it's just an aspect of your life. It isn't the actual it isn't the meaning of who you are. So people start thinking they're invincible and everything is accessible, whether it's liquor or that's accessible anyway, but all kinds of drugs and women. And I think when that begins to fade, because it will, when that begins to fall apart, it tears a lot of people apart. Even if they see a small crack in the armor, they start to panic. And I've seen it, I won't mention anybody, but I've seen it happen to a number of people. And, one of the biggest stars ever, for example, was Jerry Lewis, for example. I mean, I don't know why I'm bringing him up, but I know somebody that actually worked at his management. And, he was going, "How come I can't work?" This is when he's older. He was the biggest rock star ever, back in the day. And it tore him apart. And I think that's what it is. When you lose your fame or you misunderstand how you got there and what it means in terms of who you are, because if I became ridiculously famous, you're still Denny to me. You're still my friend. And I'm still the guy that you met before that. And that's what people have to sort of grasp and keep holding of it. It's funny. The first time I met Chef, the second time I met him, I flew to LA to meet him. And I go up to his place in Beverly Hills. It's way up in the hills and everything. And I pull in, big gate and all this stuff. Now, this is all new to me because I was dealing cards at an illegal blackjack game right before this. And so I'm waiting for him and I'm standing, in his living room, and this naked girl comes running out and jumps in the pool. And, and I'm thinking like, I might want to do this for a while. This seems okay, and Chef's not going to remember this, but, he came out and he had a joint, some marijuana. And he said, "Hey, would you like a hit?" He's got a very low voice, as you know, he's like, "Hey, Kane, would you like a hit?" And I said, "Okay," because I wanted to, I want to hang a little bit and, be accepted. So I took one and blew it out really fast because I don't do drugs. I got so ridiculously high. I didn't know where I was. I didn't know what was going on. I jumped into the pool and the water was freezing. I don't know how this girl was able to stand it. It turned into like a crazy deal. But that was my first experience sort of hanging out with Chef other than the meeting at the management company.
But even those that don't lose their fame, so many die of drugs and everything. I mean, or have it like Ozzy Osbourne or like Alice Cooper. I mean, why is that a part? I mean, you managed to stay out of that. Why is that a part that always comes to people? Prince, it doesn't matter where you are. Why do they end up there? Are they under pressure?
Well, I think all of us, everybody talks about addiction. I think all of us are addicted to something, whether it's good, whether it's bad. There's something that our brains will always gravitate towards. And there's all sorts of versions, permutations of what it is to be addicted. And so like Alice, for example, has an extremely addictive personality. He is so addicted to golf. And I'm so addicted to lifting weights. I lift weights all the time, not because I'm into, looking in the mirror of competing or whatever. I just find like that to be like a gratifying experience. I think if you give somebody who has the propensity for that, and most of us do, if you give somebody something that makes them feel superhuman, they're going to keep doing it. And you know, so you say to yourself, well, should we get rid of all drugs? I said, I think certain drugs have to remain illegal, and we have to make sure that people don't take them. But it's the same thing with an alcoholic. I can drink every day for a week, and I'm not going to become an alcoholic. I'm not going to want to do it. I could do cocaine. I could do heroin. I'm not going to be addicted to it unless I completely abuse it for months and months and months. And I'm going to have, like, you know, physical reactions to it. People that do that and they need that, it fills a gap for them in a serious, passionate way. They're going to keep doing it. And it's a hard thing to control because the accessibility in the industry is everywhere. Now, I don't know what it's like, you know, in high finance, big business. I don't know if there's a drug stream there. My brother was telling me at hospitals, there's drug problems with the doctors because they can walk into these rooms and they can see a big bottle and they can grab something. So a lot of it has to do, I think, with the availability of it.
Wow. So going back to your career, we stopped where finally they find you. Why would they take a guitar player that wasn't known, that didn't write? I mean, how did they even know you can write so well? And decide that you are going to be the one with Alice Cooper and not try to find, you know, like you know, people that are more, you know.
Well, it's two things. They saw something in my writing, like I said, when a publisher sent them my songs. Bob Ezrin saw a lot of potential in it, as did Alice. The other side of it is, Shep is a very instinctive human being. I'll tell you something that I've really never told anybody. I went there, I met with him. It was very important to him that Alice and I became friends, that Alice be safe with somebody. I wasn't the first guy that he wrote with. He sat down with a lot of different musicians, but a lot of them, you know, would drink. They'd say, hey, you want to get a drink? And say, Alice could not do that. He couldn't touch anything. So Shep is one of those people that has a tremendous sense for what is good for his artists. He managed me for a while and I got a feeling for that. He really stands in front of him. He knows who you are as a human being. And rather than just looking at numbers, he looks at who you are, what's best for you, because ultimately that's what's best for the artist. And they'll produce maybe some more equity earning, you know, songs or whatever it is. And so then I made an offer, because I was going to write with Alice. So I wanted to charge to write for Alice. I wanted to say, oh, you know, I should get this amount of money. You know, I was clueless, you know what I mean? And it was a lot of money. It was kind of way too much. And Shep calls me up. Now, I don't know Shep, but I had a feeling about who he was. And he said to me, Kane, I think that's, you know, it's a lot of money. I'm not sure, you know, we want to work with you. And I said, you know what, Shep? I trust you. That was the best 3 words I've said ever. Ends up flying me to LA. I get a place. He gets me a car, sends me to Maui for 3 months to write with Alice. It just shows you the type of people that I luckily got involved with. There is one other little thing. Now, at that point, I always say to people, like if I do any sort of seminars with musicians, even older people that want to write, I think I can write a hit song. Like you're one of those people that I've met, that you're a musician, you have a creative soul along with your business as well. And I always say to them, if you work as hard as you can, if you become as the best that you can be, or whatever it is that you're doing, the world will beat a path to your door. I am absolute proof of that, because who would want a 230-pound muscle guitar player? Motley Crue wasn't going to call me. ABBA wasn't going to say, hey, we'd love to have you join the band. You know, the only band in the world that would ever hire me found me, Alice Cooper, you know, because he had this big freaky guitar player, you know, and listen, I could play, you know, that's not all it was. And it sounds so funny because your audience is going, okay, this guy had a guitar that shot flame, a big muscle, he's a prop, you know, but I really did, you know, hone my skills so that I can play, you know. So I think that's what it was. It was a combination of those things that got me with Alice Cooper. And then, you know, of course, we hit it off. We became friends.
And then, by the way, you wrote "He's Back." That's was the most successful song that I think was the one nobody believed in ever, and suddenly it became the biggest hit, right?
Yeah, yeah. Well, it's funny because we
For it
wrote,
was Friday the 13th, right? For the
yes, and we wrote three versions of that song. Some of them were very heavy. One of them was totally rock, and then um, Shep said, "Hey, you know what? Why don't you write with this guy?" He had written "Like a Virgin" from Madonna, and if you listen to it, the intro, there's a little similarities there. So we sat down with the guy, and he was awesome. Yeah, keyboard, he hit those chords, that sort of stuff. It was all a groove in it. And Alice and I had a blast with him. And then, on the guitar solo, I tried to do something, this kind of this very like slithery kind of snake kind of a guitar solo in it to keep the sort of evil thing going regarding Friday the 13th. So yeah, it worked out really well. We ended up loving that song, and of course, we've heard really heavy metal versions of it too, where like they're screaming and everything. It's pretty funny.
And then, I mean, you have a lot of fun doing that. I mean, I can talk with you for hours, but I'm
Yeah.
jumping to, and then you leave right before the biggest album in Alice Cooper's history to date, right before Trash. I mean, you took the heavy burden of taking somebody. His albums were a mess before you met him. That period between 79 and 85 were the worst. I mean, some of them I really like, but they were not successful. They were weird. They were, not selling at all. And then you were coming, taking the load in a way, or sharing the load of transitioning that to something that was way more successful. And then right before the big album, you decide now is the time to do a solo album.
Well, what had happened was, the first record came out, and so they started putting a tour together, and for some reason, a lot of big venues wanted Alice Cooper again because he had. Hold on one sec.
Yeah, you're good.
Okay, there you are. He had he had done some tours before that, and they hadn't done very well. But suddenly we're at Joe Louis Arena, Wembley, all of these like massive places. The whole tour started falling together. Tremendous amount of press. And I think what had happened was it was a combination of two things. They knew Alice was no longer drinking, so he was straight again. That was part of the press release. He had a new band. And, somewhere in the backdrop was this giant guitar player that, and so we did a few shows and it just started picking up. We sold out 3 nights at Joe Louis Arena. The records didn't sell as much as they could have, partially because of the record company at the time. MCA was very weak in that genre, but the tours reflected massive success. So, at the end of the second tour, I get a record deal on Geffen. Alice changes his record company. And we sort of felt in order to move forward properly with each project, because I had to spend 100% of my time on the Saints and Sinners record, the Geffen record. And Alice, of course, he was working with the people over at his new record company. And Desmond Child said, let's write to me. He said, why don't we write your album? And I said, oh, well, that's great. He wrote Living on a Prayer. He wrote Angel for Aerosmith. He wrote Living La Vida Loca. I mean, the guy's written so many hits. And, it's really funny. I walked in to write with him one day, and I had just gotten my first publishing deal. It was for $150,000. And I was like completely over the moon. That kind of money doesn't exist anywhere. It was so much money, right? And so I walked in and I was ready to tell him. I said, dude, I got something. The phone rings. This is a true story. And he hangs up and he goes, geez, I just signed a deal with EMI Publishing, $1 million for 1 year. And I went, and he said, what did you want to tell me? I went, forget it. That was 150. So, but that's what happened. We had to concentrate. And it's really funny because Alice and I basically lived together. When he was in LA, he'd stay at my house in Woodland Hills. Okay. And the morning that, we were kind of done, I'm in bed and there's a knock on my door, and the door opens and Alice is holding two bags. It's like a scene from a movie. And I said, hey, and he goes, I'm leaving you. And he starts laughing and we're cracking up. So yeah, it was a very friendly, nice thing. And, it turned out to be, it turned out to be a good decision. So, yeah.
And then you went solo and you had, as I said, several hit songs. And that was great. And at some point, grunge comes in and you leave completely or almost completely the music world.
Yeah.
And that's it, and become a graphic designer, and which is great.
Well, what happened was I'd always drawn. I was always into art. As a kid growing up, I was a Marvel Comics freak, and so I always had some sort of sense of graphic art and visual. I ended up working at a broadcast design company, and I ended up being the executive producer there. And we had commercials on the Super Bowl. We had some Bud Light commercials, J.C. Penney, all sort. So it was like a real company. And of course, I was surrounded by tremendous talent. So I sort of, got as much information of my experience there working with them. And then went on to do some of my own stuff with, I wanted to leave the music industry because the culture had changed. So what was I going to do? Was I going to get tattoos, get some baggy shorts, and try to imitate Pantera, bands like that are fully legit, like amazing bands, but it's a different style of music. So I had to be true to myself and do what it was that I felt. If I was going to make a record, I don't know if it would have fit into that world. And the other thing, Denny, is the music industry is not the best place for anybody to be. I've done some film stuff, and if you're on the set at a movie, it's a different environment. The crew, everybody's working to make the film happen. It's a very friendly environment. Of course, there's other experiences that are involved with that, but it's a very friendly, helpful environment. The music industry is just a little bit more cutthroat, and so I tell in those seminars I mentioned that I've done at different, when I'm advising younger musicians. I go, look, you can't take the negatives of the music industry and let it scare you away, because, where do we come from? What's the evolution of our role in this? Well, back in the day, we used to stand by the side of the road with shoes with little bells on them, playing a mandolin, and rich people would come by in a carriage and throw food at us. Like, that's the beginning of musicians, So it's still pretty much the same today. I mean, we're playing, we're giving these big business entities, our product, and then we get a little bit, of money, as it gets kind of like the droppings from it. Everybody else is making way more money off of it. The point is, you can't do it for money. You can't do it for other people. It's one of those art forms that really requires you do it for yourself. So you can't let any of that bother you. And, maybe you'll hit success to the degree that some of the people that become absolutely wealthy from it, as an artist.
And there are very few that don't surrender to that. Basically, probably only one that I can think of. When you think about Frank Zappa, he got his own record company. So he said, screw you guys, this is my rights, I'm taking everything. And he never commercialized. He said, "The hell with it. I'm not going to surrender for money, right?"
Right.
And somehow he made it through.
Right.
But
I liked getting paid. So I'll tell you the other thing too is writing is the real estate of music. A lot of the bands that some of the people that may see this, their favorite bands back in the day when they were kids. Certain guys are doing well because they wrote some of the music. Maybe the drummer, and I'm not picking on drummers, but he didn't write any music. He's getting no money from that. There's nothing. So he has to get another job. So, fortunately for me, I ended up doing a lot of writing. And, you see, for example, I had a third of a song on a 10-song album with Kiss, with Paul Stanley and Bob Ezrin. And the checks were really big. I mean, I used to look at that going, wow, I mean, that's just a third of a song, you see. And so, Kiss was pulling down serious money, even during that album period where they were kind of on a lower ebb. Of course, it shot up again right away. But yeah, I mean, it's kind of difficult to, when you get into the business aspect of it. And it's one of the things that sort of drove me out of the whole deal. I decided, if you're a creative person, you're going to be creative in no matter what it is you do. So I ended up, getting into the broadcast design thing.
And we have a couple of questions from folks here that I didn't attend to, but just maybe one last question from me is that, look, when how, in the old world, you guys became famous by hard work, by pulling all those stunts, getting Cooper to stand with a truck stuck in the middle of Piccadilly Center, and the way everybody started the hard way and they got there. And today, I think even Queen wrote a song about it, how much they don't really appreciate it. You got the new world where you have talent shows or you have YouTube, and people become famous like that, bypassing all of that. How do you feel about that? All those I Got Talent shows and all of that. You had to work 15 years for that. They just went on stage and
it's still, the music industry is still very, very difficult because it's funny, your view of that is the one that I share. I don't think things are worse. People that are part of the old business model, even business people, think that things are much worse. Technology has come in and cut the legs off from under so many industries, as I'm sure like much of your audience is aware of. And that's what happened with the music industry. Once all that peer sharing and downloading, and I've mentioned this before, but if you look at the younger generation, for example, well, we got rid of albums, we went to CDs. Then they didn't want CDs, it was downloads. And now they don't even want to download the song, they want to stream it. It's the same thing with houses. They'd rather live in an apartment or stay at home with their parents. They don't want to own a car. They want to Uber. It's not about it. It's sort of a cultural shift that's taking place in terms of how kids look at possessions and material and self-worth. So that's why it's so incredible with Facebook and all these social medias and YouTube and everything. Everybody's listening or everybody's communicating with each other through these venues. And I do think that if you are born into this particular business model, that you can excel with it. And I tell people not to be depressed. Of course, my friends from the older business model hate this because they don't recognize it. How do I do well on YouTube? And I'd say, well, if you have a kid that's 11 years old, maybe he can help you,
So a couple of questions that I have here. Thanks for sharing your story, Kane. Did you ever have a plan B? Were you all in awe, or did you a timeline in which afterwards you would quit and work 9 to 5?
No, I didn't have a plan B, and it's not intelligence that got me there. I mean, the thing is, when we're young, how much do we plan? We're thinking, oh my God, you're 30 years old, you're so old, like that. So we have a different feel to things. It's all about momentum. It's always going to take us through this next wall and knock it down. That's all it is. And so when I was confronted, because I thought this was all going to keep going. I was in 2 movies, 2 Alice Cooper world tours, 2 albums, my albums, 5, publishing deals. I was going, wow, this is my life. This is great. Well, suddenly it ended. And it was literally, it's not overnight, but it feels overnight. I learned later that a year is like 5 minutes now for some reason. So, fortunately for me, I didn't say, okay, I'm going to work at an ice cream shop, or I'm going to completely change what I'm doing. What I decided to do was concentrate on another aspect of who I am that I think I excel in, and that is, art and visuals and stuff like that. And I taught myself computers. And you mentioned this before. I actually, this is so funny. I put together this whole prospectus, so almost like a white sheet is all it was, for a video game, a CD-ROM game, which shows you how old it was. And I actually got it signed, like the first one I ever did. Now, it never got made. I mean, I really didn't know what I was doing, and the company was getting very small, and it was kind of. I ended up doing a CD-ROM game, my next effort, but my point was that there was no way I was ever going to stop creating, and then I felt like that's the best way for me to generate whatever equity I could to get through life. So
And there were many others that didn't quit. I mean, the big
yep,
guys, Motley Crue and all these guys, they can quit and just make money just from,
they can quit and come back and quit and they can do whatever they want.
But what about, Kip Winger and Warrant and Poison and these guys that were hanging?
I admire them. I admire them so much, Denny.
We spoke about that guy and not Dangerous Stories, but all those bands that were a little bit, not as successful, and suddenly, Slaughter, how did they survive? I mean, they didn't give up, and they kept.
I'll tell you something. One of the greatest stories was Kip Winger's a friend of mine. Of course, he was before grunge entered.
I'll just tell to people that don't know, he was the bass player with you at Alice Cooper's tour.
With Alice Cooper, and then he ended up doing She's Only 17 and all those
hot songs. Until people start to pick on him, including South Park. I think, was it not South Park?
Yeah, what was it? Beavis and Butthead.
Beavis and Butthead and Metallica, and people started to make fun of them. And
Yep. So yeah, well, I see. The thing is that once that came in, Kip was about to headline like big venues, and then boom, was over. That was literally overnight. And instead of quitting, he kept playing. And I remember a few years later, I said, Kip, what are you doing today? And he said, well, I got to play. I'm going to do a show. And I said, where? And he said, at a Borders coffee shop. So he went from playing Long Beach Arena with a band called Cinderella, let's say, or a band like that, to doing a coffee shop. And he said, where no one listens. And he stayed with it, which is unbelievable, because now he's playing live with his band. He's making money doing it. He also does solo shows, and he's a classical composer. And he was nominated for a Grammy for a classical composition a few years ago. So his devotion and dedication to that type of music and whatever it is that he was in, his creativity in that regard in music was never ending. And it never stopped. Me, I decided the music industry itself, I'm not that crazy about it. I'd rather do something else, learn more, expand. I mean, my dad once told me, you don't have to have one job in life. You got one life, but you don't need one job. And your job reflects your journey, your experiences. So you may as well, grab as much as you can. So I'm really happy I did that. I met a lot of great people and, learned a lot about, art and business as well.
And a couple of quick questions. If you weren't a musician, what would you want to do? What would you have wanted to do in life?
I think be a tennis pro. That never went away. Because those guys, you think about that. What a life. The pro tour used to come by my club, and I'd see these guys walking out and they got towels and stuff, and all these girls are chasing them, and they get center stage and they hit these shots. Fantastic, but nothing can ever replace playing Reading Festival. And there's like I keep hitting this number, but I believe it was like around 20,000 people, and you hit the stage and just and what I saw, the first time we played Joe Louis Arena, we were really scared. The band was nervous. It was essentially our first show. It's Halloween night, live on MTV. 20,000 people at Joe Louis Arena. And we're behind stage and the band is just in shock, but the keyboard player suddenly plays the first notes of Welcome to My Nightmare and the place explodes, So we're as wide-eyed as you can be. And Alice goes, Welcome to my nightmare, like that. The crowd goes nuts. And the way I arranged Alice's new show was heavy metal. So when Alice, before then, Alice had done tours where everything sounded like the classic. Alice and I decided to just obliterate that because he had to compete with the Ozzy Osbournes and the Van Halens and all that. So we came in and suddenly Alice kicks down this gate and we come in really heavy. If somebody wants to see that, you can look it up because it's really a classic moment. And Alice ran the show. The band calmed down immediately. Alice had the ability to communicate with the last person in the bleachers way up there. And so that's what I started to learn. First I was focusing on some girl in the front row, you know what I mean? And then it starts to expand, and it's a strange feeling. There's nothing that can ever replace that, because you really, people that make products, people that, business people, they're the closest thing they get to that is if they become maybe CEO of the year and they get up and speak in front of a huge crowd of people and everything. It's exhilarating. And it's the same type of thing for what we were doing, to be able to play a note on guitar and have like thousands of people scream. It's fantastic. Yeah.
I can do another 2 hours with you. So maybe last quick question. I'll take
Sure.
Put them together here. Your favorite book, your favorite film, and maybe your top guitar players.
My favorite book will be a very strange book. It's called The Holographic Mind. And what it says is that what you're looking at right now, like what you are staring at right now, is something you've generated in your brain, and behind you is chaos. And Albert Einstein wrote this guy this letter and said, every day, what you just said to me about that, he sent him a letter. He said, I'm starting to believe that. I'm afraid to turn around. So it was like kind of an interesting book. I just find it like, I think that we generate our reality way more than we think we actually do. My favorite movie is Wild at Heart by David Lynch with Laura Dern and Nicolas Cage. I think it's a fantastic movie. And then in terms of my favorite music, I listen to a music form called enka, which is a Japanese. I listen to jazz. And of course, I listen to rock and metal. There's a band called Arch Enemy. Excuse me. The girl singer in that band is in my new video. And if people want to have their minds blown, just watch that video and wait for her. Alice Cooper is in it. I'm in it. And then you'll see one of the most beautiful petite women come out and completely tear your brain apart. It's absolutely incredible. So, yeah.
So, it's been amazing speaking with you today, Kane.
It was great. Thanks for the opportunity. I really love it. Yeah.
Thank you. I'm waiting to see you hopefully in person soon at one of our conferences or when you're in New York.
Hey, I'll head right over.
I'm going to leave everybody with one of my favorite songs that you wrote. And I'll see you soon.
See you soon, Denny. Thank you so much. And thank you for everybody that listened.